The key felt wrong in my hand. It was a new key, cold and sharp, not the familiar, worn brass one that had been on my ring for 15 years. It slid into the lock of the heavy oak door of the hearth, my father's restaurant, my restaurant, and it wouldn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it, a knot of confusion tightening in my stomach. Then I saw it, a thin silver scratch mark around the keyhole. The lock was new. My breath caught in my throat. I pressed my face to the cool glass of the front window, cupping my hands to block the morning glare. The dining room, which should have been dark and sleeping, was brightly lit, and it was full of ghosts. My brother, Alex, stood in the center of the room, his arms crossed, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. He was talking to two men in sharp suits who held tablets and laser measuring tapes. They weren't chefs or suppliers. They were developers. They were measuring my father's legacy for its coffin. One of the men pointed to the beautiful hand-carved bar my grandfather had installed 60 years ago, and I could read his lips through the glass. "That'll have to go." Alex just nodded. He didn't even flinch. He caught my eye through the window. There was no surprise, no guilt, just a cold, final dismissiveness. He had locked me out. He was selling my home, my life's work, my entire identity, right out from under me, and he had the audacity to do it in broad daylight. This wasn't just a business decision, it was an execution. Have you ever poured your entire heart and soul into something, a place or a project that felt like a part of your own body, only to have someone with a piece of paper and no understanding try to rip it away from you? It feels like they're not just taking a thing, they're taking a part of your past and your future. Let me know in the comments where you were watching this from. If you've ever had to fight for something that was more than just a job, something that was a part of you, please like this video and subscribe to this community. This story, my story, doesn't begin with the changed lock. It begins with the smell of roasting garlic and the sound of my father's laughter, the two things that had been the foundation of my entire world. The hearth wasn't just a restaurant to me. It was my real home. I took my first steps on its worn floorboards, their patterns as familiar to me as the lines on my own hand. I did my homework in booth number 4 every night after school, the red leather cracked and softened from decades of use. The staff weren't employees, they were my aunts and uncles in every way that mattered. Maria, our head chef with a fiery spirit and a heart of gold, taught me how to properly chop an onion when I was 10, her thick, calloused hand guiding my own. Sal, our bartender with a slick-back silver pompadour and a story for every occasion, taught me how to count back change before I learned it in school using lemons and limes as props. And at the center of it all was my dad, Tom. He was the heart of the hearth. He was a big man with a booming laughter that could fill the entire dining room, yet he had the gentlest hands, capable of plating a delicate piece of fish or fixing a child's broken toy with equal care. He knew every customer's name, their favorite dish, the story of their first date, which had of course been at the hearth. He believed that food wasn't just sustenance, it was love made edible. He inherited the place from his father, and he treated it not as a business, but as a sacred trust. He wasn't a businessman, he was a caretaker. He saw the same passion in me. My older brother, Alex, was different. 2 years my senior, Alex was smart, ambitious, and from a very young age, deeply embarrassed by our family's quaint little restaurant. While I was in the kitchen, learning the sacred 20-ingredient marinara recipe that was our family's crown jewel, he was in his room studying for the SATs. He saw the hearth not as a home, but as a stepping stone to escape from. He went to a fancy business school on a scholarship, got a high-powered job in finance, and moved 3 states away to a city of glass and steel. He only came home for Christmas, and when he did, he'd look around the bustling, happy dining room with a kind of pitying disdain, as if observing a failing third-world country. "Dad, you're sitting on a gold mine of real estate here," he'd say, scribbling calculations on a napkin that made no sense to me. "The land value alone is astronomical. If you just leverage your assets, you could franchise this place. We could have a hearth in every major city." My dad would just smile, that patient, knowing smile of his, and shake his head. "Why would I want 10 restaurants I don't care about when I have one that I love? This place has a soul, Alex. You can't franchise a soul." Alex never understood. To him, the restaurant was a number on a spreadsheet, an underperforming asset. To me and my dad, it was our life. 6 months ago, that life came to a screeching halt. Dad got sick. It was a fast, aggressive cancer that stole him from us in pieces, giving us no time to prepare for the gaping hole he would leave behind. I took over running the hearth full-time, a role I had been training for my whole life, but was not ready to assume. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and grief, trying to be two people at once, the daughter holding my father's hand through chemotherapy, and the boss holding his legacy afloat. Alex flew in for a weekend. He stood awkwardly by the hospital bed, told my dad to fight hard, and then flew back to a big merger he was working on. He sent a very expensive floral arrangement. When my dad passed, the silence he left behind was a physical presence. The hearth was the only place I still felt him, and the scent of the wood-fired oven and the familiar creak of the floorboards and the faces of the customers that he had loved. The week after the funeral, Alex and I sat in a stuffy lawyer's office to read the will. It was simple, just like my dad. He left the building and the business to be split 50-50 between his two children. It was a decision made from a father's pure love, an attempt to be fair to the son who left and the daughter who stayed. It was also the mistake that would almost destroy everything he had ever worked for. Alex saw his 50% not as a legacy to preserve, but as a stock to be cashed out. With a somber, practiced look of duty, he announced he was taking a sabbatical from his job to help stabilize the family business. I was so broken by grief, so desperate for a connection with my only remaining family, that I was naive enough to feel a flicker of hope. I thought that maybe in our shared loss we could finally connect, that he could finally understand what this place meant. His idea of helping was hole up in Dad's old office with a sleek laptop and a perpetual scowl. He wasn't looking at recipes, he was running the numbers, and he didn't like what he saw. After a week of silence, he called me into the office. The room, which had always smelled of my dad's pipe tobacco and Old Spice, now had the sterile, metallic scent of Alex's ambition. "Grace, these margins are a joke," he said, pointing a manicured finger at his spreadsheet, the screen glowing with charts and graphs. "We're paying our staff 20% above the industry average with full benefits. Our produce costs are astronomical. You're buying tomatoes from the local farmer's market, for God's sakes. We could get frozen, pre-diced produce for half the price from a national distributor." "Dad always bought local, Alex," I argued, my voice tight with the frustration that was becoming my new normal. "People come here for the quality. They come for Maria's fresh pasta. And our staff, our family. Maria has been here for 30 years. She held you when you were a baby. You want me to cut her pay? It's not about what Dad always did. It's about running a profitable business." He shot back, his voice rising with the impatience of a man explaining a simple concept to a child. "You're too emotional about this. You're running this place like a charity, not an enterprise. You have to separate the sentiment from the balance sheet." That became his mantra. I was too emotional. My decisions, which were based on 15 years of hands-on experience and a deep, intuitive understanding of our clientele, were dismissed as sentimental nonsense. He wanted to change the menu, add trendy, soulless dishes like deconstructed bruschetta and avocado foam. He wanted to fire our oldest waiters and replace them with college kids at minimum wage. He wanted to squeeze every last penny of profit from the place, even if it meant destroying the very soul that made it profitable in the first place. We fought constantly. Our arguments would echo through the empty dining room after we'd close for the night, two worlds colliding. I was fighting for my father's memory. He was fighting for a return on his investment. 2 weeks ago, he dropped the bomb. He did it calmly, dispassionately, as if discussing the weather. "I've had an offer," he said, looking at his laptop, not at me. "A development group wants to buy the property. They've been trying to acquire this whole block for years. They're willing to pay way over market value. They want to tear it down and put up a high-rise condo with retail on the ground floor."
I stared at him, my blood turning to ice in my veins. "You can't be serious." "I'm dead serious. This is our ticket out, Grace. Our golden parachute. We could both walk away with millions. You could open your own little cafe somewhere, do it your way without the burden of this place. This is a win-win." "A win-win?" I whispered, my voice trembling with a rage so profound it felt like it might choke me. "You want to bulldoze our father's grave and call it a win-win? This restaurant is his legacy. It's Grandpa's legacy. Dad's legacy is a pile of debt and a failing business model," he yelled, his cool corporate composure finally cracking, his face contorted with years of repressed resentment. "I'm done watching you run his legacy into the ground with your sentimental garbage. I am a 50% owner, and I am selling my half. The law is on my side. Either you buy me out at the developer's price, or I will file a petition action with the court and force a sale of the entire property. The choice is yours." He knew I didn't have the money. He knew he had me cornered. He was giving me an impossible choice: surrender or be destroyed. I refused to give him the satisfaction of an answer. I just turned and walked out. That was the last time we spoke. And now, a week later, I was locked out of my own life.
The first few hours after finding the change lock were a blur of numb disbelief and impotent rage. I sat in my car across the street, watching the developers in their sharp suits measure the life out of my home. My phone buzzed incessantly. First Maria, our head chef, her voice a mixture of confusion and anger, then Sal, the bartender, then the rest of our small, loyal staff. Alex had sent them all a curt, impersonal text message. "The hearth is closed for emergency renovations. We will be in touch regarding your final paychecks." He wasn't just shutting me out, he was firing our family via text. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. That evening, driven by a desperation I didn't know I possessed, I let myself into the dark restaurant with the emergency backdoor key, a key Alex, in his arrogance, had forgotten existed. The silence inside was a desecration. The ghosts of laughter and clinking glasses were all that remained. I walked to my dad's old office. Alex's laptop was gone, but he had left a pile of papers on the desk: financial analyses, profit and loss statements, and a copy of the developer's formal multi-million-dollar offer. It was more money than I could imagine. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. How could I fight that? Tucked underneath it all, I found something else. An old, dusty, leather-bound ledger, one I hadn't seen in years. It was one of my dad's old accounting books from before everything was digitized. Its pages were filled with his familiar, looping handwriting. I opened it, not knowing what I was looking for, just needing to touch something that felt like him. Mostly it was just records of sales and expenses from a bygone era. But in the back, there was a section marked simply loans. My heart sunk. This was it. The pile of debt Alex had been talking about. My brother, in his aggressive financial review, must have found this and seen it as a huge off-the-books liability, a flaw in the business he could use as an excuse to sell. I scanned the page. The entries were cryptic: names, dates, and amounts. Henry Chen, $10,000. Sal Petrosian, $7,500. Maria Vargas for cousin, $5,000. The list went on. A dozen names, all people I knew. Pillars of our small business community. My stomach twisted. Had my dad been in so much trouble that he had to borrow from all his friends? I saw a sticky note Alex had left on the page. On it, he had tallied up the amounts. The total was significant. Well over $50,000. Next to the total, he had written, "Undocumented liabilities, high risk, no contracts, severely impacts valuation." He had seen this page. He had interpreted it as a list of my father's debts, and he had used it as ammunition, as proof that the business was a sinking ship. A finance guy from a world of ironclad contracts and aggressive collection agencies would see a handwritten list of names and numbers and assume the absolute worst. He saw weakness. He saw failure. But I wasn't a finance guy. I was my father's daughter. And as I looked at the names, a different story began to emerge. a story Alex could never comprehend. Henry Chen, who owned a grocery store. Saul Petrosian, who owned the auto body shop. Maria's cousin, who had started a small bakery. I remembered fragments of conversations, snippets of stories my dad had told me over the years. The time Mr. Chen's freezers all broke in the middle of a heat wave, the fire at Sal's garage that insurance was slow to cover, the bakery's oven needing a sudden expensive repair. My dad hadn't been the borrower. He had been the lender.
This wasn't a record of his debts. This was a record of his decency, a list of the people he had helped with handshake deals and a quiet trust that was more binding than any legal document. Alex, in his cold, transactional worldview, had made a catastrophic error in judgment. He had looked at a list of assets and mistaken it for a list of liabilities. And in that moment, sitting in the dark office, I realized this wasn't Alex's greatest weapon against me. It was mine against him. This was the twist. He thought he had found the company's fatal flaw. I had just discovered its greatest strength. The next morning, my fight began. I didn't go to a bank. I went to Chen's Groceries. The little bell above the door chimed just as it had since I was a child. Mr. Chen was behind the counter, a quiet, respected man with kind eyes. He looked up and a small, sad smile touched his lips. "Grace, I was so sorry to hear about the restaurant closing. Your father, he would be heartbroken." "He would," I said, my throat tight. "Mr. Chen, I'm here because I need to ask you something. I found one of my dad's old ledgers. It says his name next to yours and a number, $10,000. His expression shifted from sympathy to a deep, knowing sadness. He nodded slowly and led me to the small office in the back of the store. "I was hoping you wouldn't find that. Your father would not want me to speak of it." "He borrowed money from you?" I asked, testing my theory. Mr. Chen let out a soft, dry laugh. "No, Grace, it was the other way round. 10 years ago, during the heat wave, all my freezers died. I was about to lose everything. The bank wouldn't give me a loan fast enough. Your father walked in here, saw the panic on my face, and the next day he came back with a cashier's check. He saved my business. He saved my family. He told me to pay him back when I could, no rush." The relief and vindication that flooded through me was so powerful, I felt dizzy. "That's what I thought," I whispered. I laid everything out for him. Alex's ambition, the developers, the changed locks, and most importantly, Alex's fatal misinterpretation of the ledger. I spent the rest of the day on a pilgrimage. I went to Sal's auto body, where the smell of oil and metal hung in the air. Sal, a big man with grease-stained hands, enveloped me in a bear hug. "Your old man was a saint, Gracie. When my garage burned, he paid my guys' salaries out of his own pocket for a month until the insurance came through. Said a man's pride is in his paycheck." I went to the small bakery run by Maria's cousin, a tiny woman named Sophia who burst into tears when I told her what Alex was doing. "Your father gave me the money to buy my first real oven. He said the neighborhood needed better bread." One by one, I visited the names in the ledger. Each person had a story. Each story was a thread in the rich tapestry of community and trust my father had woven his entire life. I wasn't just collecting information, I was collecting debts of gratitude. By the end of the day, I had a stack of signed, notarized affidavits, each one a testament to my father's character and a legal acknowledgement of a debt owed not to him, but to his estate, to the hearth. I finally had my ammunition. I wasn't going to fight Alex on his terms, with big money from developers. I was going to fight him on my father's terms, with community, with integrity, and with the one thing he fatally underestimated, the truth.
The confrontation, when it came, was not a shouting match. It was a quiet, cold meeting in a lawyer's office that smelled of expensive leather and ambition. Alex had agreed to the meeting, likely assuming I was coming to surrender. He sat across the polished table, flanked by his attorney, looking impatient. "Let's make this quick, Grace," he said, not making eye contact. "I have a call with the developers. Have you decided to be reasonable?" "I've decided to be thorough," I replied, my voice calm and even. I slid a thick folder across the table to his lawyer. "What's this?" Alex asked, annoyed. "That is a formal notice of breach of fiduciary duty," I said. His lawyer's head snapped up. I had his attention now. "As the co-executor of our father's estate and the acting manager of the business, you commissioned a valuation of the company's assets in preparation for a sale. Is that correct?" "Of course. Standard procedure," Alex said dismissively. "Well, your valuation is fraudulent. You failed to include a significant number of assets, specifically over $50,000 in accounts receivable." I pushed a second folder across the table. "Inside, you will find notarized affidavits from a dozen local business owners, each one acknowledging a personal loan from our father, a loan that is legally an asset of his estate. You had access to the ledger where these were recorded. In your haste to declare the business a failure, you incorrectly identified these assets as liabilities. It's a rather embarrassing mistake for a high-powered finance guy." Alex's face went white. He grabbed the folder and frantically flipped through the pages, seeing the names, the signatures, the notarized seals. He was trapped. "The developers are making an offer based on your flawed valuation," I continued, pressing my advantage. "If you proceed with the sale, you will be committing fraud. I will sue you, personally, for breach of fiduciary duty. I will file an injunction against the sale. I will contact the developers and inform them that the property is a contested asset with clouded ownership and undisclosed financials. They will run from this deal so fast it will make your head spin." I leaned forward, my voice dropping. "You wanted to run this like a business, Alex, so let's be pragmatic. Your multi-million-dollar deal is dead. Your only way out of this without a lengthy, expensive, and very public lawsuit is to call them right now and tell them the deal is off. Then you are going to sell your 50% stake to me." He stared at me, speechless. "But you don't have the money." "I don't need the developer's money. I have a new partner, Mr. Chen. He and several other community members whom my father supported are forming a small investment group. They are backing me. We will buy you out, not at the inflated developer's price, but at the correct market valuation, once the full assets of the company are properly accounted for. You'll still walk away with a very handsome profit, but you will walk away, and I will get my keys back." I had him. I had beaten him not with emotion, but with his own cold, hard logic. Law, finance, fiduciary duty. He had wanted a fight based on numbers, and I had just shown him that his numbers were wrong. He looked at his lawyer, who gave him a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of the head. He had no legal standing. He was beaten. He slumped back in his chair, the fight completely gone from him. The smug, arrogant brother was gone, replaced by a pale, defeated man. He had been so sure of his own brilliance, so contemptuous of our father's sentimental ways, that he had been blinded. He had failed to see that the restaurant's true value was never in the land. It was in the community, an asset he could never understand and therefore could never possess. He mumbled to his lawyer, his voice a ghost. "Draw up the papers." I had won.
The hearth reopened a week later. It felt like a resurrection. Our staff came back loyal and overjoyed. Our regulars flooded in, and they brought friends. The story had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, and people wanted to support the place that had refused to die. We were busier than we had ever been. Mr. Chen and my new partners were the silent backers I needed. They trusted me implicitly, their investment a quiet vote of confidence. I made smart, careful upgrades, a new kitchen ventilation system, a modern point-of-sale system, but the heart of the place, my father's heart, remained untouched. The reconciliation with Alex never came. He signed the papers, took his check, and disappeared back to his world of glass and steel without another word. There was no apology, no acknowledgement.
His final act was to cash out his father's legacy, just as he had always wanted. I realized I didn't need his apology. His absence was its own kind of peace. He was a weed my father's garden was better off without. My life is loud and chaotic and smells of garlic and wine. It's full of long hours and endless work, and it is entirely my own. I am not just the caretaker of my father's legacy anymore, I am its future. I have honored it not by keeping it frozen in the past, but by proving that its old-fashioned values, community, loyalty, and a handshake deal are still the most valuable assets a business can have. Have you ever had to fight to protect a legacy, big or small, that was passed down to you? Share your experience in the comments below. Your stories of honoring the past give us all hope for the future. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength. Remember, some things can't be measured on a spreadsheet. A legacy isn't about the money it makes. It's about the lives it touches. And that is always worth fighting for.